Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Yeager, Director of Heritage Programs for Missouri Humanities. Thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual Cultural Heritage Workshop webinar on Historic Preservation Advocacy. This program is presented by Missouri Humanities, and our mission is to enrich lives and strengthen communities by connecting Missourians with the people, places, and ideas that shape our society. Whether you're joining us through Zoom or watching on Facebook Live, feel free to interact with us throughout this program. If you're on Facebook, you can leave a comment or a question that we'll get to towards the end of the program. And on Zoom, you can use either the chat feature or the Q&A feature to submit questions throughout the discussion, and we'll address as many as we can during our Q&A session towards the end of the program. If you enjoy our program today and are interested in seeing more from Missouri Humanities, please check us out on Facebook or on our website for the most up-to-date information about our events. We also have a membership program where benefits include free books, discounted tickets to special programs, and access to members-only events. To become a member, visit mohumanities.org and click Memberships under the Donate tab. After our program today, I'll be sending everyone an email with a link to our program survey. I would really appreciate it if you could all take the time to let us know what you thought of the presentation today. These surveys are really important as we continue to bring public programming to Missourians and work toward a more thoughtful, informed, and civil society. With all that said and done, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today, Bill Hart. Bill is the Executive Director for the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation, or Missouri Preservation, and will be presenting The Good, the Bad, and the Underrepresented, advocating for historic preservation statewide and in your own community. So Bill, I'll have you take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Caitlin. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, first of all, the good, the bad, and the underrepresented could probably be rephrased as the best of, the worst of, and the underrepresented. I'm going to kind of highlight our biggest feel-good advocacy program, our most cautious of our endangered historic places list, and then all of our programs really keep in mind the underrepresented people in Missouri. We have two great historic preservation advocacy organizations in our two biggest cities here in Missouri. The Historic Kansas City Foundation on the west side of the state and the Landmarks Association on the east side of the state in St. Louis. But a lot of times there is very little representation for citizens in small town Missouri. Go to my next tab. It's not advancing my slides here. There we go. I work for the Missouri Alliance for Historic Preservation. Missouri Preservation has been in existence for 42 years now. We were formed as the Missouri Heritage Trust in 1976 in conjunction with the bicentennial of the state of Missouri. Our mission is to preserve place and community for future generations of Missourians. First of all, to closely define what advocacy is, because a lot of people do believe that advocacy has a lot to do with lobbying. To the contrary, advocacy is not lobbying. Advocacy, as a definition, is public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. And on the flip side, to lobby is to seek to influence either a politician or a public official on a specific issue. So this is boring information, but important information from the IRS about lobbying in general. In general, no organization may qualify for 501c3 or tax-exempt status if a substantial part of their activities attempt to influence legislation. So that's not saying that you can't lobby, but it needs to be reined in to a very minimal extent. Legislation includes acts by Congress, by any state legislature or any local council or similar government body with respects to acts, bills, resolutions, or similar items such as legislative confirmation of a point of office, or by public referendum, ballot initiative, or constitutional amendment or other procedure. It does not include actions by executive, judicial, or administrative bodies. Organizations may, however, involve themselves in issues of public policy without the activity being considered as lobbying. For example, organizations may conduct educational meetings, prepare and distribute educational materials, or otherwise consider public policy issues in an educational manner without jeopardizing their tax-exempt status. Whether the organization's attempts to influence legislation, for example, lobbying, can constitute a substantial part of its overall activities, it's determined on the basis of all pertinent facts by both compensated and volunteer workers and the expenditures devoted by the organization to the activity when determining whether lobbying activity is substantial organizations to the activity when determining whether lobbying is an activity is substantially taxable year may lose its tax-exempt status, resulting in all of its income being subject to tax. So you need to be very careful, and I encourage you all, and if you are members of historic preservation commissions, you're on boards, you belong to a local 501c3 advocacy organizations, to definitely check with your accountant or your treasurer about what constitutes lobbying and to the extent of which you can lobby. So what is not lobbying? Communication with judicial or legislative branch or administrative offices, discussion of broad issues without referring to a specific piece of legislation, providing a strong opinion without a call to action, naming legislators in favor or against an action without a contact asked, preparing nonpartisan analysis of legislative proposals, testifying or providing assistance to legislators, self-defense lobbying where the organization's future is threatened, and lobbying as a private citizen and not as an organizational representative. Advocacy helps nonprofits advance their mission, increase their funding sources, and solve community and societal problems. Many nonprofit organizations' missions address the needs, misfortunes, and inadequacies of individuals and communities, and even help individuals and communities aspire and dream for a better quality of life, that from board source. So some good components of a good advocacy strategy. Number one is effective communication. And communicating to people about your mission of your organization, about legislative changes and nonpartisan voter education and the issues of historic preservation in this case. Sharing the mission with others, employees and board members, board members who serve as the organization's ambassadors. Connect with others. Advocacy's core is connecting with others who share values that will move the mission. So Missouri Preservation as a statewide belongs to the State Parks organization. They advocate for historic resources within state parks. On a larger scale, we're members of the National Trust, institutional members of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So if you can connect with others to forward your mission, that is an ideal component. Lobbying, minimally, direct and grassroots lobbying, and as I said, contact your accountant or tax preparer. The 990PF is a private foundation's tax form that's filed every year, and definitely educate your public, your members, non-members about your successes, about threats to historic preservation, and about emerging issues in historic preservation. So, number one, develop programs and events that define your organization. In our case, preserving place and community for future generations of Missouri. Our biggest advocacy program is what we call Preservation Day at the Capitol. We have gone and minimally argued for the passage of certain bills specifically the Historic Preservation Tax Credit program that's so popular here in the state of Missouri. But what we do on Preservation Day is primarily educate legislators on the importance of programs that support historic preservation. Now, I, for one, agree that there should be money in place to preserve historic places for their intrinsic value. I get calls from people on a daily basis nearly wanting to save a barn, a farmstead, a downtown, a specific historic site, place, bridge, object. And sadly, there are very few grant programs for bricks and mortar projects in historic preservation. We live in the age of show me the money. The program has to be of some financial benefit for it to be popular, especially with legislators who are looking to not only serve their communities, but also bolster the public opinion about the officials. So what we do on Preservation Day is, it's public information, all the tax credit projects that have happened because of the Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program. We tailor in our office a list geared to each state representative and each state senator, showing exactly what projects have taken place in their districts and the dollar amount, the address of the place and the dollar amount of the investment that has happened because of this historic preservation tax credits. Again, the tax credit helps improve the quality of life in big towns and small towns. You can see our button that we used in 2016, Preservation Equals Jobs, documenting how many jobs were created, construction jobs and permanent jobs that were created because of the program. And then actually our membership with the National Trust helped us to advocate nationally. 2 years ago, I went with this group of people to my right in the photograph to the US Capitol, to Washington, DC, to talk about a bill that had just been actually introduced, which actually became the Great American Outdoors Act, which will provide millions of dollars to historic resources in national parks throughout the nation. So basically, we didn't go in and say, you need to vote for this. We told people how many of their colleagues, if any, had signed on as co-sponsors. And actually, we were very successful in getting a co-sponsor in Senator Roy Blunt here in Missouri. We're very thankful to have his support, which led to the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, which was signed by the president last month. So some of our key programs, the good, the bad. This is probably our biggest feel-good advocacy program, our statewide preservation honor awards. We've been distributing honor awards at a ceremony in the state capitol for about 25 years now. So it's very important to promote those successes, to do it on a very public place like the Capitol, where projects that we recognize are actually recognized in turn by state representatives and senators through proclamations to our awardees. We usually distribute about a dozen to 15 awards. Several of them are called the Preserve Missouri Awards. They are for specific projects that have been exemplary in the field of historic preservation. We have an award called the Osmond Overby Award, which is awarded to a person who has, or an entity that's published a work, a published work highlighting the architectural history of Missouri. We distribute a couple or a few McReynolds Awards, and those are for projects that have been ongoing or that have created synergy in the area of historic preservation. And then at the end, we have the Rozier Award. It is a recognition of lifetime achievement in historic preservation. So and actually, folks, this is the first time anyone is seeing this. We have, because of COVID, we haven't been able to have our event yet at the Capitol. But these are the projects for 2020 that have won our statewide preservation honor awards. This is the Woodward Lofts, formerly a former factory that's been repurposed into apartments in St. Louis's Grove neighborhood. The Mrs. John Isbell House in Washington, Missouri, a rehab into a bed and breakfast in Franklin County. Column restoration on the historic 1859 courthouse in Troy, Missouri, the Lincoln County Courthouse. The J. Rieger and Company Distillery, a prodigal son returned, Andy Rieger, to kind of rekindle his family's business in Kansas City. They now distill bourbon, gin, and a number of other potables, and have an event space that you can see there on your right-hand side. The Ivers Square restoration in the city of Cape Girardeau recognizes the restoration of their bandstand and several public monuments that reside in Ivers Square. These are a couple of examples of the Gotham Apartments, a huge complex of apartments that have been restored to the Secretary of the Interior standards and a tax credit project in Kansas City. A small hotel, the Buckley Hotel in Excelsior Springs in Northwest Missouri, a small town which used to be a railroad spa destination. I recommend it highly if you're doing a weekend staycation to visit Excelsior Springs. A property that stood vacant for probably 20 years at the corner of Texas and Miami Avenues in South St. Louis, 3600 Texas Avenue. Then our Osmond Overby Award for a published work went to Thomas C. Grady. Judge Grady last year distributed and came out with The Lost St. Louis Riverfront. This is a book that documents the architecture of the 40-some odd blocks that were lost on the St. Louis Riverfront for construction of the Gateway Arch and the Jefferson National Memorial. And then our McReynolds Awards went to, one of them went to the wall, the Missouri Botanical Gardens historic wall from the 1870s, a huge undertaking that was funded in part by the National Park Service. Another ongoing project, McReynolds Awards, was the O'Neill House. It was the home of a silversmith in St. Genevieve, a French Creole building. This was on our endangered list for a while, and we're always really happy when we can flip from our endangered list to our honor roll. And then the third ongoing project that really created a lot of synergy is here in Kansas City, the African American Heritage Trail that you can see on the bottom of the screen guides you through 10 very important African American historic places in Kansas City. And finally, our Rozier Award for Lifetime Achievement went to this man in the upper left, Timothy Conley, for his restoration of several buildings. The lower right, another one of the French Creole buildings in St. Genevieve. Above it, the mansion with a mansard roof, the Blair Hughes House, former residence of one of Missouri's governors. And on the far left, on the bottom, the Academy building in St. Genevieve. So we kind of formed our honor awards kind of in the image of the National Trusts, and several organizations have likewise come up with their own ways of recognizing excellence in their own communities. Here's the Landmarks Associations. They're called the Most Enhanced Awards, and this was for 1211 Tower Grove in this Grove neighborhood again in St. Louis. The Columbia Historic Preservation Commission calls their program the most notable properties. And these don't have to be a huge list of places. They can be one place, but the most notable property here in Columbia, you see in a historic photo on the left and a current day photo on the right. This is what's believed to be the oldest building in the city limits of Columbia from the 1830s. It was started as a female academy and has been known as the Niedermeyer Apartments for many, many years. And the photo on the bottom right doesn't really do justice to the building, but it shows you the threat to this building, the huge behemoth buildings, the banal boxes in the background. One was planned exactly for this site. The city of Jefferson City, the historic city of Jefferson, is their advocacy organization there. They have something that's called the Golden Hammer Award. These are places that are recognized, both commercial and residential. You see, this is the high-rise bakery, which is on High Street. But a number of them, most of them actually, are residential buildings. And they not only present you with an award, but they also have signs in each of the yards or properties to kind of highlight and bring recognition to these to the Golden Hammer Awards. Now, the Moberly Historic Preservation Commission kind of combines a best and a worst with their notable properties register, and both exemplary renovations or restorations are recognized here, as well as endangered properties such as the Miller House that you see here out on Urbandale Avenue, which is a victim of demolition by neglect in Moberly, unfortunately. And then on the other side of the coin, the bad, we used to call our program, we've been recognizing both the honor awards and the Places in Peril for about 25 years now. Our Places in Peril used to be called the most endangered historic places, and that was evidently misleading to a lot of people who wanted to know at the end, were they the most endangered historic place, when au contraire, all of them are the most endangered historic places in Missouri. So we renamed it about 5 years ago, Our Places in Peril, borrowing a term, a title from the Georgia Historic Preservation or Advocacy Organization. So for the last year, Our Places in Peril included the Latino Church La Gloria in Kansas City, the Capitol Avenue Historic District in Jefferson City. This had been on Our Places in Peril before, a couple of years before, because of a landlord that owned so many buildings in the Capitol Avenue Historic District that were suffering demolition by neglect. Most of them were abandoned. There were probably about 20 buildings. And then last spring, the double whammy happened to the Capitol Avenue, and a tornado swept through much of the district, the historic district listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Carter County Courthouse, Missouri, this was a WPA project. This is an 1870s courthouse that was clad in native fieldstone as one of our first WPA projects after the Depression. It experienced a flood, which I'm sure was a 1,000-year flood to the adjacent river. It never flooded before since the 1870s. But they suffered a flood and they moved to a new justice center, leaving this place empty. The Dehodiamont House, again from the 1820s, 30s in St. Louis, which is recognized as the oldest residential building in St. Louis. You can see on the first floor the stone building that was at the nucleus of the original building, and then you see the Gothic Revival additions that were made in the 1870s and 1880s. The Emmaus home complex in Marthasville. This was originally home to Die Deutsche Evangelische Kirche, the German evangelical church. It was their seminary for training the clergy in this congregation, this German congregation. The German Evangelical Church eventually became the United Church of Christ, and the seminary moved from Marthasville to St. Louis and became Eden Seminary. The complex was used as the Emmaus Homes was a huge sprawling group of buildings, about 14 buildings, including a chapel that served as residential use for mentally retarded, developmentally disabled people until last year, when the last person was mainstreamed out of the campus, leaving this huge campus unoccupied. The village of Galloway in Springfield, a mostly collection of roadside buildings. Again, you can see the giraffe stone, or the Native American, or the Native Missouri field stone. This locally recognized historic district threatened by inappropriate development in Springfield. The Hall of Waters, again in Excelsior Springs. This was another WPA project for Missouri. The Hall of Waters served as a kind of a public spa and bathhouse and actually has a bar in it, the longest bar in the world, supposedly serving only water. I think there were 8 functioning springs in Excelsior Springs back in the day. And then the Holloway House in Rolla. Much of downtown Rolla has already been decimated by both a regional development by the regional hospital and the university, which sits right in the center of downtown. So the Holloway House, again, planned demolition by the regional hospital there of a historic building. And then history doesn't happen just 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It happens today, and it happens in the 1950s. These are Katz drug stores, the mid-century modern structures, the Googie architecture on the upper right hand, the Katz drug store in Springfield, and on the lower, the kind of streamlined Art Deco Katz drug store in Kansas City. Then we sometimes have categorical nominations as well. This was for a whole group of buildings, about 3,000 buildings that are vacant and owned by the Land Reutilization Authority in St. Louis. There is a master plan that calls for eliminating thousands of potentially historic buildings to establish a natural storm runoff. So the project kind of jives with the Metropolitan Sewer District's mandate to create cleaner runoff and wastewater from buildings throughout the city. And finally, well, not finally, but the Sarah Lou Cafe at the corner of Sarah and St. Louis Avenues in St. Louis. This represents the only building on the 4 commercial corners that is substandard. We've been working with the affordable housing people in St. Louis to try to get title to this and to help them fundraise. And you'll see a very interesting way that we're helping to fundraise for this organization, Northside Community Housing, in just a little bit. Second Baptist Church, it's in the Holy Corners Historic District in the city of St. Louis, suffering by demolition by neglect. And the Shanley Building, the first international style building in the city of Clayton, which is the administrative and governmental capital center of the county government in St. Louis. And finally, Westland Acres. Obviously not for its architecture, but for its development. This Westland Acres is a historic African-American community that now finds itself straddled between Wildwood and Chesterfield, 2 of the most Tony residential neighborhoods in the St. Louis County. And a lot of the homeowners with modest incomes in these modern homes have almost been priced out of their own homes because of rising real estate taxes. So some ways in which local folks have advocated for endangered places. The Friends of the Holloway House, this is their Facebook page to help bring attention to the plight of the Holloway House in Rolla. Here's something from the historic city of Jefferson. This was giving an update. You can see it's in the Capitol Avenue Historic District. and they were announcing redevelopment possibilities, places where you could buy endangered historic buildings, and then they also report on the progress of buildings that are in progress, the restoration in progress. The Historic Kansas City Foundation has its own list of historic, endangered historic places, and you can see the Cat's Drugstore made it there as well. On the bottom, one of the, a mansion that now resides on the campus of the University of Missouri, Kansas City, a target of demolition. And on the far left, in pretty deplorable shape, the childhood home of Satchel Paige. Here's another Facebook pages. One of our Facebook pages, Save the Historic Brumley Swinging Bridges. This is adjacent to Brumley Road, is adjacent to the Lake of the Ozarks, and there are several of these swinging bridges along Brumley Road that are endangered. And then the Cape Girardeau Historic Preservation Commission also releases a yearly list of endangered places. This is the Esquire Theater. And that you can see this was televised on KFVS television in Cape Girardeau. And then another, a lot of bridges are from the highway, the era, the beginning of the highways, which started in the 1920s. So we're getting lots of obsolete bridges, bridges that have been replaced by other bridges that are still in their original places. The state offers free to a good home, lots of these historic bridges, and this was one of them here, the Jenkins Bridge in Aurora down in southwest Missouri. And again, as I said, the Sarah Lou, one of the employees at the Northside Housing Coalition's husband is a brewer. He owns Civil Life Brewing Company, and you can see as a promotion to help raise money for the restoration of the Sarah Lou, you can just simply drink beer. So getting your message out there, getting back to getting the information and communication out there, the one thing that you hear about overwhelmingly is your elevator speech, your 5-minute speech that you can give to anybody, especially a captive audience that's stuck in an elevator with you on to the 8th floor or wherever. Talk about the relevance of your organization. Talk about how you educate and advocate for your organization, for much like we do with our programs. Get your message across, tell them what your mission statement is, and suggest ways in which they might partner with you, that they might, that if it's a legislator, that they might come up with laws and legislation that promotes historic preservation, potential members, and the like. Media, definitely, you want to shake the hands of media whenever you can, because those are the people who will get your information about your organization out there. And in dealing with the media, effectively promote your news events via press releases. We do these for all of our programs, both those permanent programs that I showed you and for standalone programs and seminars. We also do, as our educational, chief educational effort, we do the Missouri Preservation Conference. It's a 3-day conference that happens every year in normal times. And we move to a different city in the state every year. We only go to cities that have a historic preservation ordinance in place. You'll hear about that on the 3rd installation of these webinars when you hear from the State Historic Preservation Office and their certified local government program. But we use the Missouri Press Association because we are statewide. They have contacts for television stations, radio stations, and all of the print media throughout the state. If in your smaller town, you can obviously go to, you can bypass the Press Association and go to the local newspaper, the local television station for your region, and the like. And again, use social media as well. Include the media in your invitations and events. We always have media packets for the media on our table at all of our programs, and then share important opinions by op-ed columns in newspapers. This is a very good way to get your message out there, especially if you have dire circumstances or emergencies and emerging preservation issues in your neighborhood. Establish and regularly maintain a website. These are some of the most popular website, easy to use, easy to create, and easy to maintain websites. On the left, you see in the center the logo for WordPress. That is our own website provider is WordPress, and actually I use Squarespace to the left of there, which combines marketing through a website, but also allows you to sell goods, books, registrations, and things like that through Squarespace. Strikingly, Snap Pages, Wix, Weebly, Jimdo, Duda, those are just some of the popular ones. And this will be available to you online, this presentation, so you don't have to write all these down. And then effectively use social media. I think we have nearly 3,000 friends on our Facebook page now. That's a very effective way to get your message out there, to get it out there very quickly. And you can also, by their metrics, it tells you how many people liked your post, so you know what's important to people out there. There's some more. These are some more of there's Viber, Snapchat, Tumblr, Snapchat, and Facebook, as well as Twitter in the upper right here. And then we also use email marketing and software programs. These are, if you have maybe an Excel list of your membership, you can use any one of these platforms to send out mass, if you try to send mass emails out from your regular email account, they're going to end up in people's spam folders because you sent out too many. Well, the cyber world knows that Constant Contact and Emma and MailChimp and HubSpot and Vertical Response and OptinMonster are all software programs that help you distribute mass emails. So these are really good ways. You can put in graphics. They're usually easy to edit and format your messages to get messages out there quickly to your constituents. And then kind of in closing, again, communicate and educate your public. Host a standalone session on if you have mostly bricks in your downtown, maybe you can have a seminar on how to best practices in caring for brick and masonry. Educate them about the historic tax credit if your town has a historic district that could benefit from the tax credits, but always communicate. Collaborate and connect with as many people in the media as you can through these programs, and create programs that advance the mission of your organization. And in closing, I thank you for your attention at this seminar today. If I invite you to please go to our website. If you're so inclined, join Missouri Preservation. There's a membership tab at preservemo.org. And our telephone number to our office, and my personal email at the bottom of the list, director@preservemo.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We have a couple of questions, and I invite everybody, if you've got questions, we're going to go on until about another 20 minutes. So we've got plenty of time for questions. So feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen or the chat feature. So here's kind of a big question. And I will say that I think if anybody on this that's attending right now is attending the next webinar at 3 p.m. With Kelsey Matson, she'll probably cover this, but in case you're not, this is, what is your advice for getting started with historic preservation, small town Missouri? Loaded question, lots to do there. So this person is in a town of 7,500 with an historic downtown, but no organized effort to protect or preserve historic resources. Previous efforts were thwarted by concerns over restrictions to property rights. there's a lot to unpack there. So
Very good.
take a stab at it.
Well, there are two ways that you can recognize the historic nature of your town, maybe if it's a downtown or if it's an important residential district. One way is through the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register of Historic Places is essentially the federal government's list of historic places in each state that they deem worthy of preservation. So it starts with a nomination to the National Register. It can take you 9 months to a year probably to go through the entire process. And I'm sure Kelsey will talk to you about the National Register of Historic Places, but you fill out a nomination form, and then it goes from, it's vetted by staff at the State Historic Preservation Office here, which is in the Division of State Parks in Missouri. After it's vetted by them, it goes to a council called the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. This is a group of Missouri citizens who serve voluntarily on a board that recommend or don't recommend nominations to the National Register that have already been vetted by the SHPO, or the State Historic Preservation Office. Preservationists use initials and acronyms for everything. But after it's vetted by the Advisory Council, then it's forwarded to the National Register coordinator that's in the U.S. Department of the Interior and the National Park Service for the official listing in the state of Missouri. If you go and Google Missouri National Register list, as a matter of fact, the State Historic Preservation Office won one of our Osmond Overby Awards for published information on architectural history. It lists by county every nomination, so pretty close to it, every nomination to the National Register of Historic Places in Missouri by county. So that's a wonderful program. You won't get a lot of pushback. People think because it's the National Register, it's the federal, they're going to be the most restrictive on what you can and can't do with your property. And much to the contrary, the local preservation laws, the laws that we create by virtue of that specific quality, we can make them as lenient or as stringent as we want to because they're local preservation ordinances. Being listed on the National Register of Historic Places in and of itself is simply that recognition aspect. Now there are statewide, like our state historic preservation tax credit program, which does use as one of its qualifications you're being listed on the National Register either as a contributing resource in a district or individually listed on the National Register. But I tell people, if you get your property listed on the National Register today, you can demolish it tomorrow. It's your property. The federal government doesn't, unless you're relying on a project that relies on that criteria being listed, there really aren't any restrictions homeowner-wise or building owner-wise that you have to adhere to for being on the National Register. Now they do, like I said, they do open you up to lots of especially financial perks for rehabilitation, of substantial rehabilitation of historic places. Then talking about these local ordinances, and Kelsey Matson will talk to you about it, there's a program called the Certified Local Government Program. And participation in that state program makes you eligible to, this is the carrot, makes you eligible to receive preference in communications with your state historic preservation office, but it also makes you eligible to apply for monies that our state historic preservation office probably receives, I would estimate, maybe 70% of their income from the federal government. And the federal government mandates that those states that receive, well, every state receives funding, at least 15%, and Kelsey may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's at least 15% of the money that they get has to be directed back out to individual communities. And so CLGs, certified local governments, are those entities that are eligible to apply for those funds. And basically the CLG program requires that you recognize historic buildings or districts within your municipality, within your town. Again, these ordinances, it does require passing an ordinance and creating a Historic Preservation Commission, a group of people who decides what restrictions will be placed on, excuse me, buildings in the National Register, or I mean in the local district. They have to, they provide a certificate of appropriateness for whatever you want to do that impacts your historic building within this district or the town. So they will rule on if their paint colors or whatever. Very, very seldom are those part of an ordinance, but they can be. But they would also issue a letter determining whether they think it's appropriate that you demolish a building if you've asked for a demolition permit in those communities. So I really, to that person, I advise you to definitely tune in to Kelsey Matson's Strategies for Rural Missouri, because she will talk about both the National Register and more locally our Certified Local Government Program. And remember, I was saying we have a 3-day conference. Those places where we go have to have a preservation ordinance and participate in the CLG program in order for us to come there.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah. So when we do these cultural heritage workshops in person, which is usually what they are, you know, that's a question we often get, is that a lot of people just don't know where to start. And I often refer them to the National Register program because it's kind of that easiest first step. You know, if you know that there's a property, you know there's interest, but people are afraid that it's going to cost them too much money or that they're going to get so much pushback. You know, you're very right in saying that, you know, it does more good than restrict. You know, it really doesn't restrict anything.
Right, the National Register does not. And
right.
what a lot of people do is go first to the Certified Local Government Program, because and definitely you will get maybe more pushback there than with your National Register push, but it makes you eligible for those funds. And so what a lot of people do is they establish a CLG and a preservation ordinance, making them eligible to apply for funds. And then the State Historic Preservation Office does fund the survey and nomination of buildings to the National Register. So it can mean even a broader kind of constituency for utilization of especially those tax credits, which rely heavily on being on the National Register of Historic Places.
We have someone that says that they're interested in saving the Second Baptist Church in St. Louis. It's in their neighborhood, and she has a connection to the family that lived in her house. Is there an organization that has already started this process? And if not, where do I start to champion to save this beautiful building?
If you're interested, please email me or call me at that telephone number, because I can put you directly in touch with the owner of the building, who and I'm sure it's an option for him to sell the building, as getting him off the hook with us for sure. But definitely, I could put you definitely in touch with the developer who might be interested in selling the church to you. It's a beautiful building.
Can you repeat your contact information?
My email address is director@preservemo.org. And our telephone number at our office is 660-882-5946, 660-882-5946. Now, obviously, I'm in my kitchen, but so it may take a day or so for us to get your message, but please do. If you're interested in Third Baptist Church, we'd love to have you take ownership of it and take care of it.
So going back to advocacy, so Missouri Humanities, you know, we are an organization that receives state and federal funding. So typically, again, in a normal year, you know, we have an annual advocacy day. And I appreciate you distinguishing between lobbying and advocacy, because for us, it means we're going there and we are meeting with legislators. We are, you know, catching them in the halls. We're, you know, trying to talk to their legislative assistants.
In the elevator.
In the elevator, exactly. You never know who you're going to be in the elevator with. So, you know, I think your comment about having that little spiel put together, you know, is really great. And especially since you know, those little points to grind into their head, so that if they see, you know, for us, for example, if they see a bill come along that is, you know, that includes funding for us, you know, there's gonna be language in there, and maybe something in there is gonna spark their memory that, oh, I met somebody from that organization in the elevator and I remember really liking what they had to say. You know, you never know what that little bit is that's gonna help influence somebody. And I know for us, it's hard because, you know, a lot of people just don't know, again, where to start with advocacy. You know, at what point do you take it to, you know, the state level? You know, not everybody needs to go to the Capitol, of course, and talk to legislators, but, you know, would you say that, you know, advocacy at kind of an actual state level, needing to talk to people in power, at what point does that come in? Is it only when you think that there's an issue? Is it something to where, you know, money involved, obviously, but, you know, at what point do you need to take it to that big of a level to get your name into their heads?
Well, usually if there is some kind of pending legislation that you can educate them on the issues about, the tax credits, for example, which are the biggest boon to historic preservation that I know of in the last 50 years, as you know, financially, is to but if I find out somebody's from St. Genevieve and that's the state representative, I'll say, oh, we just recognized the Antoine O'Neill House in our statewide honor awards, and that'll, of course, the light bulb will go off in their head, and they'll realize what a great organization you are. But I think try to stay in touch with the statewide organization. We send out alerts. You can actually, if you want to, our administrator, Riley Price, is the best for keeping track of our database, our loyal friends. Email her that you want to be included in our list of contacts. We won't badger you too much to join Missouri Preservation, but you'll get those regular vertical response emails from us. You'll get notices of emerging statewide issues. But for local commission, well, let me give you, I'm sure she's on the call, but let me put Riley on the hook and give you her email address. It's admin, ADMIN, @preservemo.org. And Riley can certainly get if you send her your name, address, phone number, and email address, we'll get you in there. We won't spam you. But that's a good way to keep involved and to be updated on the statewide issues that you might be able to help with if you do need to go to the Capitol. But for most smaller, like the guy who's in the 7,400 population range, most of your efforts I would consider to be local efforts, especially starting with that preservation ordinance and becoming a certified local government. Because once that process is in place, and you don't have to have a staff person, but if you have that Historic Preservation Commission, they can get you on the radar. They can send notices out, press releases out to the media, to television stations and radio stations and newspapers, local newspapers, to get those issues out there. And like I said, again, use your op-ed, write letters to the editor and say, you know, demand action that way.
Mm-hmm. I think too, you bring up an excellent point about these local issues. You know, I like to tell people, you know, always be in touch with your legislators. Always know who your legislators are. You never know when, you know, one of them might show up to a program, or one of them might show up to an event. You know, Missouri Humanities, you know, our list includes state reps, state senators, at all different levels of government officials. And, you know, I've had one or two that all of a sudden a registration comes through and it's a state legislator, and it's, you know, they actually will show up to a local program that is in their district if they're, you know, not in session. So, and that is invaluable FaceTime with somebody who is in charge of making.
Absolutely. And invite them to the those honor awards ceremonies that we have at the state capitol. We let the legislators know, hey, these people, this is important. They're getting an honor award from us, statewide honor award from us. And 99% of the time, that state representative and that senator, both within the district in which that awardee lies, will come to the Capitol and the celebration and present a proclamation of appreciation to those projects or those people that have made a difference in historic preservation. So God, the recipients, oh so happy, but your legislators, they're a little narcissistic sometimes, and they like that FaceTime. They like to get up on stage and show their force. And this is just like I said, the honor awards is just the best way for them to come and recognize important historic undertakings while getting a little FaceTime with their public.
And all of their addresses, all of their email addresses are available to the public. So if you know them, you can easily do a quick Google search. If you don't know them, it is very easy to find them. So we always make sure that they're on every email blast. And if we have any sort of paper literature that we are sending out to promote a program or promote an effort, that they are on that mailing list. So highly recommend anytime you can invite them, absolutely do.
Definitely. And you can go to house.mo.gov or senate.mo.gov and find out who exactly you can put in your zip code and find out exactly who your elected representatives are. So you know
their job to know what's going on in their districts, and they want to show FaceTime. So
absolutely.
So a few more questions, Bill, before we wrap up. This is kind of a multi-part question that someone has asked. What are the trends in Missouri for historic preservation? Are you seeing more or less interest in these topics? Is your membership growing? And how do our efforts compare to surrounding states?
Wow.
Yeah.
First of all, our membership is pretty static at this point. It's tough for us as a statewide organization because we can't, I live in St. Louis and we have the Landmarks Association here as our local advocacy organization. And we usually we usually defer to them if there's an issue, an emerging issue, to the larger towns like that. But as far as smaller communities, the best way for you to really advocate for historic resources is to go to your council person or your alder person or whatever. And do you have the question there? You can read me more. I know it was a multi-part question. Our membership has become static, but what I was going to say is it's really hard for us to, and that's why we use social media and that virtual vertical response so often, is that so that we can get out there to the entire state, because it's difficult for us to fundraise and get members because we do represent an area that is so large like that. So it has been a challenge. Anyway, Caitlin, I'm sorry.
So I think the only one you haven't touched is, how do our efforts compare with surrounding states? Do you know any about, how our historic
preservation? Well, actually, our getting back to that, show me the money, our state historic preservation tax credit program is the exemplary program in the United States.
Wow.
I think there are about 30 states now that have historic preservation tax credits programs in a variety of forms and a variety of percentages and amounts that you can claim as the credit. But most of those states will tell you that they go back to the Missouri example when they're rolling out their tax credit proposal for tax credits in their state.
Excellent.
So I think we're kind of ahead of the curve there. Most of the rest of our programs are kind of in line with what other states do. Our biggest educational program, our state historic preservation conference, is probably one of the better ones in the country. We offer 3 days. Some states offer one every other year. And then obviously in the time of COVID, we're doing a lot more electronic learning, if you will, Zoom meetings and things like that, to bring our message to the citizens of the state.
So the conference, have you already had it? Was it before COVID, or is it going virtual? What's the conference situation?
Well, we were hoping that maybe we're going to probably take some of the sessions that we had planned for. We originally had planned to hold our conference in Jefferson City was the host city this year in June, the first week of June. Obviously, that was at a time when the numbers were really spiking nationwide with COVID. So right now we're planning to offer a lot of our sessions, or several of our sessions at least, by Zoom meeting or electronic means. So hopefully we'll be back. We are hoping that we can have our announcement of our statewide preservation honor awards still this year. So we're looking at maybe December and trying to figure out the dynamics of a socially distanced honor awards program. And we usually have a luncheon or a dinner afterward. So we're looking at that. We're hoping that we can still have one of our big events this year.
I hear you. We're the same way. So we have one more question, but I'll answer that kind of as we wrap up. Bill, any last thoughts, any last things you want to make sure, points to get across as we wrap up?
Again, like I said, education and outreach are your two biggest things that you can do. And you know, like I said, your legislators and your public officials, make sure when you need something or something's wrong is not the only time that you contact them. They're happy, like I said, they're happy to get out there and participate and share in your successes. And obviously, the key point to any advocacy organization is getting your message out there and effectively communicating with your own constituents and for us statewide throughout Missouri.
Great. Well, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time. This was a great presentation, and I'm sure people really did learn a lot. It's a great time to be learning these things too. So I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Someone asked if they can view this presentation later, and the answer is yes. So during this presentation, we had it live on Facebook, and after the presentation ends, it will save as a video on our Facebook page. So if you need to go back and rewatch any portion of this, or you want to share it on Facebook with anybody that might be interested, you can find it on our Facebook page. It's Missouri Humanities Council, and that'll be on the page in perpetuity. So feel free to share, comment. If any other questions come up, please feel free to reach out to me or Bill or Riley. I think actually Bill and Riley, thank you so much for all that you did to help us promote this workshop. I know a lot of our attendees today are due to your due diligence. So I'm going to go ahead and end us there. Thanks for everybody for taking the time to be with us, for your great questions. I hope you learned something. And I hope everybody has an excellent rest of your afternoon and a great weekend. Bill, thank you again, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.